LCJ Live. Today is Sunday, July 21st, 2024. Happy anniversary to Barbenheimer. And we have a bit of a deja vu situation for Universal and the movie for this particular weekend because Twisters has the same opening weekend estimate of $80.5 million as Oppenheimer from this exact weekend last year. Universal, 2 years in a row with this estimate, and I don't think they saw it coming. Not many of us saw this high of an opening weekend coming. I thought it could do 60, and then as the numbers were starting to come in, beginning with that Wednesday-Thursday combo of $10.7 million, it was like, okay, this is going to grow over the course of the weekend, and it absolutely has. Now to $80.5 million. They were thinking 70, then 75. We're at 80.5. Currently puts it at the third biggest opening weekend of 2024 behind Inside Out 2 and Dune Part 2. But Dune Part 2's opening weekend not that far away at $82.505 million. Now, this Twisters estimate also barely above Godzilla x Kong the New Empire's opening weekend of $80 million and $6,000. So, whatever's going to happen tomorrow with the actual results could bring Twisters down to fourth place for the year, or could actually raise it to the second heading into Deadpool and Wolverine this weekend. Regardless, I think Universal is thrilled. They are overjoyed. They've got the top two movies in America, with Despicable Me 4 adding $23.8 million. It's at $259.5. Despicable Me 4, it has now passed the original Despicable Me domestically and is just a few million away from passing Despicable Me 3. This is definitely a nice bounce back from the low-ish 265 that Despicable Me 3 totaled back in 2017. And I was looking at those numbers again yesterday, and I think the problem was there were a lot of movies in summer 2017. You had Cars 3, which did less than the other Cars movies. You had Spider-Man Homecoming, which did really well for Sony. You had the Emoji Movie as well. And Planet of the Apes, Dunkirk made a lot of money mid-summer. And then you had some late summer animated movies, Nutjob 2 and Leap, that made a little bit of money, plus some indie films like Wind River snuck in. So it ended up being a crowded summer 2017 for Despicable Me 3. Also, I think the fact that Despicable Me 3 is not that great of a movie. It's okay, but I think a lot of families said, we don't need to see this twice. Whereas Despicable Me 4, which I think is slightly better than Despicable Me 3, not as good as 1 and 2. But probably better than the first Minions, but not as good as Minions 2. I think there are some families who are going to go to Despicable Me 4 more than once, and you're already seeing that, and that's why we're getting to $300 million domestically for Despicable Me 4. Now, will it come close to that 370 that Minions The Rise of Gru did just 2 years ago? That might be a little tougher. It depends on how the next few weeks go, especially with Harold and the Purple Crayon on the way from Sony. I have seen Harold and the Purple Crayon. The social media embargo lifts later today, and I'll have my conversation with Oscar-nominated director Carlos Saldana, who did some of the Ice Age movies, the Rio movies, Ferdinand, and now Harold and the Purple Crayon. That'll be available later this week at animationscoop.com and lcj.podbean.com. Had a great conversation with him. I've seen Harold and the Purple Crayon. I'll let you know my thoughts on it once the embargo lifts, and a great conversation with Carlos Saldana. That movie, I can say, will make some money for families because it's the beginning of August. It'll play well probably through the whole month of August and into Labor Day weekend. And it'll do well for families. My Penguin Friend, which I've also seen, is going to open August 16. That'll make a little money for families. But I think Despicable Me 4 and Inside Out 2 will still do well for families throughout the rest of the summer. Inside Out 2 added $12.8 million this weekend. It's at $596.4. We're still about $12.5 million away from passing Incredibles 2 to become the biggest animated movie of all time domestically. It's done incredible numbers domestically, even better numbers overseas, but we're still about $12 million away from Incredibles 2. It's gonna get there, but is it gonna get there next weekend, the end of this week, with Deadpool and Wolverine coming out for Disney? Are there gonna be drive-in pairings of Deadpool and Wolverine and Inside Out 2? What day is Inside Out 2 going to pass Incredibles 2? That's still a bit of a question. It could be by this time next week. It could be next Sunday, but it could be a little sooner than that, could be a little later than that. We will have to see. Speaking of drive-ins, shout out to Universal because they put Twisters and the Bike Riders together in many drive-ins around the country. And the Bike Riders is back in the top 10 this weekend after being out of the top 10, and it added $700,000. It's at 21.2 million. It has passed the holdovers when it comes to money for Focus Features movies, one of the top 5 Focus Features films of the last 5 years. It's also now the 5th or 6th. Oh, I had the number. Hang on. In terms of Regal Monday Mystery Movies, because that's what the Bike Riders was, a Regal Monday Mystery Movie. That's how I saw it. And it has passed American Fiction to become the 6th biggest Regal Monday Mystery Movie selection ever. It's a few million away from Arthur the King at 25 million. It won't get to number 5, but it did pass American Fiction, and without this drive-in boost, I don't think it would have. So now the Bike Riders, the 6th biggest Regal Monday Mystery Movie ever, part of that incredible program. That's how I got to see Sing Sing last Monday night. One of the most disappointing movies of the year. Oh, this movie's so overhyped. It's still in just 4 theaters. It added 64,000. It's at 234,000. Coleman Domingo and Paul Raci are okay, but man, the writing, one of the worst written dramas of the year. The writing just does not work at all. The situations, nah. So unfortunately, Sing Sing is a miss. A24 is expanding this nationwide August 2. I don't know if they're going to keep it in just the 4 theaters again this coming weekend up against Deadpool Wolverine. But we'll see. But unfortunately, a miss. A24 has had some good movies this year. I saw The TV Glow, Problemista. Maxine was not. And Civil War is not. So it's hit and miss for A24, which seems to be the case every year for A24. But yeah, speaking of Maxine, only added 819,000 this weekend. It's at 13.9. It passed those other movies in that franchise, but just not a lot of money. Pete Crook says Maxine was awesome. I like the opening section-ish, but that third act is bad. The second half isn't great. The whole thing just kind of, to me, fell flat, except for Elizabeth Debicki. Great character, great dialogue. She deserved to be in a better movie. Some other films that opened this weekend. Widow Cliquot, which made 190,000 in just 102 theaters. It's playing at one theater near me. It did okay. That per screen average close to $2,000. Pete Crook says that whole trilogy from Ty West was remarkable. You know, I didn't see X and Pearl going into Maxine because I just wanted to take a look at it as a standalone film. Maybe I'll go back and watch the other 2. Film called Bad News. We're still trying to get the money for. Made 360,000 Friday. Could be $1 million. If it's less than that and significantly less than what the initial estimate was, maybe you see Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1 sneak into the top 10 this weekend. It added just 685,000. It's at 28.5. Winter Pulled Part 2. We'll see if it's going to be out in theaters. I predict the Christmas to New Year's stretch, but now there's a rumor that Horizon's going to go to Netflix. We'll see what happens. Some other movies this weekend at the box office. Long Legs added 11.7 million. It's at 44.7. Parasite made 53.4 million for Neon back in 2019 into 2020. Of course, the Best Picture winner, currently Neon's biggest movie ever, but will Longlegs beat it? At this point, I say yes. If it can add another... I mean, the big question is Deadpool and Wolverine, and how big will all these other movies drop next weekend? But if Longlegs even does another 3 or 4 million during the week this week, that'll take it to about, let's say 48, 49. If it does another 4 million next weekend, you're there. So I think Longlegs is going to become the biggest Neon movie of all time. Number 5 this weekend is A Quiet Place Day 1, which added 6.1 million. It's at 127.6. So it'll get to 130, maybe 135, could push 140 depending on how the next few weeks go. But for Paramount, they see it as a success, but not the 188 of A Quiet Place 1 and the 160 of A Quiet Place Part 2. In 6th this weekend is Fly Me to the Moon, which had a decent size drop from 9.4 million last weekend down to 3.3 this weekend. It's at 16.4. Yesterday was the 55th anniversary of the moon landing. It's just unfortunate that this film is getting overshadowed by a lot of other films out this summer and really isn't a priority for many people. Maybe it's the story. Maybe it's the fact that the trailers and the commercials don't do the film justice. Maybe it's the fact that people know it's going to eventually be on Apple TV Plus. The running time is 2 hours and 12 minutes. There's a lot of factors there. It's too bad because I like about 80% of the film. It is worth your time, but I do think if it goes to Apple TV Plus, and maybe it'll go there sooner than later, but if it goes there, especially for November, December, could be a good holiday season film for older moviegoers at home, but it does not seem to be a priority for older moviegoers, making even less than Horizon Chapter 1. After I saw Fly Me to the Moon, I thought this was going to have great word of mouth, steady legs over the next several weeks, and older moviegoers as a counterplay to Twisters, but clearly Twisters exceeded expectations. And Fly Me to the Moon is kind of flopping, which is really too bad. Number 7 this weekend is Bad Boys Ride or Die, which added 2.7 million. It's at 189.3. Won't get to the 204 of the last one, but it will come pretty close. And we mentioned The Bike Riders and a couple other films. Oddity opened to 556,000, indie horror film. Another 300,000-ish for the Lion King re-release. Sound of Hope with 425. It's at 11.1. Yeah, those are the numbers that I have. Right now, Despicable Me 4 is currently the third biggest movie of the year. It's still a little bit away from Dune Part 2. Despicable Me 4 is at 259. Dune Part 2 is at 282. It will pass Dune Part 2. May take a bit. The question is, how high is Deadpool and Wolverine going to open to next weekend? It's what everybody's thinking about now for the next 5 days. I think it's got to be at least 100, at least 150. The tracking has it at 165. Tracking's been all over the place lately. Of course, the tracking on Twisters was like 50 and ends up doing 80. It's hard to track a movie in advance, and sometimes these numbers, it doesn't completely make sense. The Deadpool and Wolverine ticket sales in advance, and they were looking at the numbers. What you have to remember is a lot of people cannot plan their lives around a movie showing 8-9 weeks in advance. Remember, these Deadpool and Wolverine tickets went on sale so early, and a lot of people just can't commit to that, either financially or the time to reserve that in their lives. So that's why walk-up business, drive-ins, yeah, you can reserve some tickets for some drive-ins around the country in advance, but drive-ins, it's drive-up business, walk-up business. I think you're going to continue to see that with Twisters. It happened this weekend. It will continue to happen with Deadpool and Wolverine this weekend. We got some comments here. Ralphie Nugget, flop me to the moon. Yeah, that's too bad. Apple TV Plus, the biggest factor, Pete says on Fly Me to the Moon, publicly made it feel like a streamer. I guess, these are 2 stars, though. Channing Tatum's a big name. He's got that Blink Twice movie out at the end of August from Amazon. Scarlett Johansson headlining that Jurassic World movie, which rumored to have the title Jurassic World Rebirth, which I could see becoming the title. That sounds like a decent title. Let's see, interesting that Twisters and Quiet Place Day 1 recruited these acclaimed indie directors to take over big movie franchises. Right, for Twisters, this is a win for Glenn Powell. It's a win for Daisy Edgar Jones, Anthony Ramos, who was also in Transformers last summer, Daisy Edgar Jones in Where the Crawdads Sing 2 summers ago, which I thought Fly Me to the Moon could mimic for Sony in terms of box office. Glenn Powell, hot off of Anyone But You with another big hit. And Lee Isaac Chung, the director of Minari, which won the Oscar for Yoo Jun-yoon a few years ago. And this is a win for him, and we'll see if he would return to another Twisters installment. Pig and Minari are better movies. I didn't love Pig. I didn't love Minari either, but I didn't love this new Quiet Place. I think Pig and Minari are probably better than the new Quiet Place. Though here's what I think about Twisters, and hello to Drew Taylor. Thanks for being here on LCJ Live. I think Twisters has a good second half. First half, I could care less. Don't care about these characters, bland dialogue, situations, it's kind of corny, it's kind of flat. Ugh. Second half, there's a motel pool sequence that's pretty strong, and that shifts the momentum. It slows things down a little bit, except for the tornadoes themselves, but it allows the movie to focus in on what it wants to accomplish more. This is a more serious film, Twisters, than I expected. It's not completely sit back popcorn fun because you are talking about natural disasters and people's lives being ruined. And it makes several of those points throughout. So I think Lee Isaac Chung took that more dramatic approach than some other directors might have. And for the second half, it works. Maura Tierney shows up. I thought it was going to be Helen Hunt. But, those scenes, though sort of predictable, are decent compared to what we get earlier on in the film. So I like the second half of Twisters. You got to get through it. I saw it in IMAX, by the way. The sound work in the IMAX. Wow. I had 12.1 surround sound. It was nuts. It was crazy. So Deadpool and Wolverine is going to do, I think, just under 200 million. I mean, Disney will want it to get to 200 million, but I think just under. By the way, I've got my A for Avengers here because of all that Avengers Russo Brothers news. We'll see what happens with San Diego Comic-Con this week and some other stuff going on. And of course, Deadpool and Wolverine. Will they be involved in the next Avengers movies? We'll have to see. I hope the movie's good. I didn't care for Deadpool 1 or 2. Some of the Wolverine movies have been better than others, and X-Men films better than others. Logan was a good send-off for Hugh Jackman, but he decided to return for this. We'll see if it's fun. We'll see if it's entertaining. I will call it a 175. 175 for Deadpool and Wolverine this weekend. Could go higher, could go lower. It's an R-rated film. We'll have to see what happens. I hope the movie's fun. 175. And a movie hoping to make $1.75 million is The Fabulous Four, which opens in theaters up against Deadpool and Wolverine this weekend. Susan Sarandon, Bette Midler, Sheryl Lee Ralph, Megan Mullally. I've seen it. I cannot share any opinion until Wednesday, but I will let you know what I think of The Fabulous Four. But I watched it on Friday night. I will let you know. I want to say some stuff so badly, but I cannot. Wednesday, I'll have my thoughts on The Fabulous Four. Drew Taylor, that hotel sequence is so great. Dan Mindell's cinematography in 35 millimeters, no less, was everything. That's a good scene. That's probably the best scene in the film. And Beat Crooks also says a happy 100th birthday to the late, great Don Knotts, who voiced Turkey Lurkey in Chicken Little, which I watched again a couple weeks ago. Chicken Little is highly underrated. Of course, Don Knotts from the Andy Griffith Show as well, and so many classic films and television appearances. A film opening in limited release this coming week is a film called DD, which I've been seeing the trailers for from Focus Features. It goes nationwide on August 16th. If Touch from Focus Features is still playing near you, go see it. One of the best acted, directed, and edited movies of 2024. As I mentioned, my interview with Carlos Saldana will be this week for Harold and the Purple Crayon, as well as my conversation tomorrow with Natasha Klein, the creator of the new Disney animated series Primos, which premieres this Thursday on Disney Channel and Friday on Disney+. We have a great conversation. Look for that tomorrow, starting at about 9 a.m. Eastern. LCJ.podbean.com and AnimationScoop.com. And coming soon, probably a week from tomorrow, my conversation with Vincent Waller and Mark Ceccarelli, the EPs of the new Sandy Cheeks movie, Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, which is CG, SpongeBob, all his pals, and Sandy Cheeks and her family. That premieres August 2nd on Netflix. When we're back here next Sunday, live at noon Eastern, we will break down that Deadpool and Wolverine box office, and we'll preview the showdown between Harold and the Purple Crayon and M. Night Shyamalan's new thriller, Trap. For more, go to lights-camera-jackson.com. Subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Go to Instagram at lightscamjackson and Twitter X at LCJ Reviews. And if you want a copy of My Very Rocky Christmas for Christmas in July, it is available on Amazon. My Very Rocky Christmas. Get in the Christmas spirit and the Christmas in July spirit with your copy of My Very Rocky Christmas. Available now on Amazon and on the Troy Bookmakers website. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of LCJ Live. Have a good week. It'll be a good Deadpool and Wolverine week, and I will see you next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.